You don't deserve a dime of Mom's money, Dad. Not after the way you've lived your life. That's what my son, David, told me across the table of our old family home in Cedar Falls, Iowa. His face was tight with disdain, his wife sitting next to him with that smug little smile she always wore when he threw daggers at me. She didn't even try to hide her satisfaction. I just sat there, stunned. My son, my only child, looked at me as though I were some beggar who had wandered into his house by mistake. The house was mine, by the way. I paid the mortgage, brick by brick, sweat by sweat. But in his mind, I was already a relic. I should tell you who I am before this story gets too far. My name is John Whitaker, a 64-year-old retired mechanic. For 35 years, I ran a small auto shop on Main Street. Everyone in town came to me for their trucks, tractors, and cars. I wasn't rich, but I kept food on the table, a roof over our heads, and enough saved to get my boy through college. My wife, Linda, passed away 3 years ago. Cancer. She was the light of my life, and when she left, something inside me broke. David. Well, he changed after that, or maybe he was always like this, and I just didn't want to see it. See, Linda's family came from money. Old farmland turned into rental properties, passed down over generations. When she died, most of it went into a trust. And David, fresh off his shiny new job in Des Moines, figured that meant he was the new king in town. That day in my kitchen, his voice was colder than the December wind blowing outside. Dad, the lawyer already said, Mom's assets aren't yours to touch. It's all under my name. And honestly, I think that's how she wanted it. You never had much ambition. You just fixed cars. I clenched my jaw. Fixed cars? That just had fed him, clothed him, put him through 4 years at the University of Iowa. That just kept this family afloat when his mother was sick. But I didn't say any of that. Not yet. Before I continue, if you're new here, please like, comment, and subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. I stared at him, trying to find the boy I once carried on my shoulders, the kid who used to fall asleep in the garage while I worked late into the night. But he wasn't there. All I saw was a man with sharp suits, sharper words, and a wife who whispered in his ear like poison. "Don't look so shocked, Dad," she chimed in, swirling her coffee. "You had your time. Now it's David's turn to handle the estate. You should be grateful. We'll let you keep living here until you can't anymore. Then we'll figure something out. Let me keep living here." The words echoed in my skull, like I was some tenant, not the owner. Like the sweat and grease of my hands over decades meant nothing. I excused myself before my voice betrayed the anger boiling inside. I went out to the garage, the one place still mine. The smell of motor, oil, rust, and cold steel steadied me. I sat on the old stool, staring at the tool rack Linda had once painted blue to make it feel homier. That's when it hit me. They thought I was powerless. They thought I was old, tired, and ready to give up. But I wasn't. I knew things. David didn't. About the house, about the estate, about the way Linda had set things up before she died. Things no smug lawyer or greedy son could erase. And if David wanted to play dirty, then maybe it was time I showed him just how much dirt I had tucked away. Because Linda hadn't left this world blind. She knew our son's weaknesses. And she left me a way out, a way to make him choke on every word he just said. I stood up from that stool, my fists tight. For the first time since Linda's passing, I felt alive again. Not from joy, but from purpose. My son had drawn the battle lines, and I was ready to cross them. The next morning, I found David in the living room, already going through boxes of Linda's belongings. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice sharp. He barely looked up. "Sorting Mom's things. A lot of this stuff is valuable. Antiques, furniture, jewelry. Better if I take it to storage before it gets ruined here." "Ruined? In her own house?" I shot back. He sighed like I was a nuisance, not his father. "Dad, don't make this harder than it has to be. You don't need all this clutter. I'll handle it. Handle it." That was his favorite phrase now, like I was some senile old man who couldn't tie his own shoes. I stepped closer. "Your mother wanted these things here, with me. They're memories, not clutter." His wife, Emily, popped her head in from the kitchen. "John, don't be selfish. David's just trying to do what's best. You don't even use half of this stuff. Honestly, it's depressing walking in here, like a museum for the dead." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. A museum for the dead. She was talking about Linda, my Linda, the woman who raised that boy, who fought through chemo, with a smile, who knitted blankets for every child born in this town. "Put it back," I said firmly. David straightened, his jaw tightening. For a moment, I thought he might actually listen. But then he gave me a cold smile. "No, you're done making decisions around here, Dad. Mom's estate is under my name. This house, the land, the assets, they're all mine now. You just live here because I let you." I felt the blood rush to my face. "That's not true. The deed—" He cut me off. "Already checked. Mom left the property under the trust, and the trust is mine." Emily smirked like a cat that had just swallowed a bird. Later that week, word started spreading around town. At Miller's Diner, old friends avoided my eyes. At the hardware store, folks whispered behind the aisles. Everyone knew. John Whitaker, the mechanic who spent his life fixing other people's problems, couldn't even keep his own son from stealing his home. The humiliation ate at me. Every time I walked into the grocery store or filled my truck at the gas station, I felt eyes on me. Cedar Falls was a small town. News traveled fast, and gossip traveled faster. At night, I sat in the garage, staring at Linda's blue tool rack. My hands shook with anger, but I forced myself to breathe. I wasn't going to lash out. Not yet, because the truth was, David was wrong. Dead wrong. And I knew it. One evening, I invited him back to the garage, hoping maybe, just maybe, I could reach the boy I raised. "Son," I said quietly, handing him a beer, "do you remember when you were 12? We rebuilt that old Chevy pickup together. You said it was the best summer of your life. We worked side by side every day. You wanted to be just like me." He took a sip, his eyes cold. "People grow up, Dad. I'm not that kid anymore. And honestly, maybe you weren't the man I thought you were." The words sliced deep. "What's that supposed to mean?" He leaned forward. "You never pushed for more. You stayed small. Fixing cars, living in a modest house. Acting like that was enough. Mom deserved more. I deserve more." I stared at him, stunned. "More doesn't always mean better, David." He shook his head. "You'll never understand. That's why Mom left everything to me. You can't handle it." The next day, I got a letter from his lawyer. An eviction notice. I sat at the kitchen table, the paper trembling in my hands. According to the document, I had 30 days to vacate the property, or face legal removal. Emily must have been grinning ear to ear when they mailed it. But here's the thing about living in a small town. Lawyers like to talk, and one of them, an old friend of mine from high school, had once told me something about Linda's trust. Something David clearly hadn't bothered to check. A clause, one she had put in herself. And that clause? It changed everything. As I held that eviction letter, a slow smile spread across my face for the first time in years. My son thought he had won, but he was about to learn that his own mother saw through him long before I did. I sat in that kitchen, with the eviction notice spread out in front of me, the paper crinkled where my fists had clenched it. Most men would have panicked. 30 days to pack up a lifetime, 30 days before the sheriff came knocking. But instead, I felt calm. See, Linda wasn't just my wife. She was my partner. She knew David better than anyone. And she had warned me once, late at night, when the morphine had dulled her pain, that our boy might not be the man we hoped he'd become. He'll be tempted by money, she whispered, her hand in mine. Don't let him throw away everything we built. Promise me, John. Promise me you'll protect what matters. I promised her that night, and I wasn't about to break it. The next morning, I drove into town. The January sky was low and gray, the streets lined with dirty snowbanks. People glanced at me as I walked into the law office of Thomas Keating, an old friend from high school. He'd been quarterback back then. Now he was the best estate lawyer in 3 counties. He looked up from his desk as I stepped in. Well, if it isn't Johnny Whitaker. Haven't seen you since Linda's funeral. How you holding up? I dropped the eviction notice onto his desk. Better than my son wants me to. Thomas adjusted his glasses, reading it over. His brow furrowed. This came from David's lawyer? Yeah. Says I've got 30 days. He leaned back, shaking his head. Not so fast. You remember, when Linda set up that trust, she came to me first, asked me to review it before she finalized with her family's attorney. My heart thudded. And? Thomas pulled open a drawer, rummaging through some files. She was smart, John. Smarter than your boy gives her credit for. She added a survivorship clause. A what? He looked me dead in the eye. The property, including this house, can't legally pass to David until you either remarry or pass away. Until then, you retain full rights of residence and veto power over any sale or eviction. Linda wanted to make sure you were protected. I felt my throat tighten. For the first time in weeks, I could almost hear Linda's voice again, soft and steady. Thomas went on, his lips curling into a grin. So this eviction notice? Worthless. If David tries to enforce it, any judge in Iowa will laugh him out of the courtroom. I sat back in the chair, exhaling slow. He doesn't know, does he? Clearly not. And I'd keep it that way. For now, driving home, the town didn't feel so heavy anymore. The diner, the hardware store, even the gas station. I could walk in with my head a little higher, because I knew something David didn't. That night, when he and Emily showed up unannounced, her perfume hitting my nose before she even stepped through the door, I kept my poker face. Well, Dad, David asked, smirking. Ready to accept the terms? 30 days should be enough time to clear out, right? I leaned back in my chair, sipping my coffee. Funny thing, son. 30 days isn't as long as you think. Emily frowned. What's that supposed to mean? I just smiled. You'll find out soon enough. For the first time, I saw a flicker of doubt in their eyes. It was small, but it was there. Over the next week, I prepared. I dug out every old document, every bank statement, every mortgage record. I spent hours at the courthouse, looking through property files. Folks at the clerk's office gave me curious looks, but no one asked questions. By the end of the week, I had what I needed. Proof. Ironclad. Legal proof that this house, my house, was still mine until the day I left it on my own terms. But I didn't want to just keep the house. No. I wanted David to understand what he had done. I wanted the whole town to see the truth. That my son, the man they thought so polished and successful, had tried to throw his own father onto the street. And fate handed me the perfect stage. A letter arrived in the mail. David was planning a family gathering at the house, my house, to announce his inheritance formally to Linda's relatives. Invitations had already gone out. He hadn't even told me. I held that letter in my hand and felt a fire rise in my chest. He wanted a show? Fine. He'd get one. But it wouldn't be the performance he expected. The day of the gathering came like a storm rolling in from the plains. I woke before sunrise, the house quiet, except for the groan of the old furnace. I made coffee, black and bitter, and sat at the kitchen table with the documents spread in front of me. The survivorship clause, the deed records, Linda's handwritten notes in the margins of the trust papers, proof that this house was mine until the day I chose otherwise. By noon, the driveway was packed. SUVs and shiny sedans lined the gravel like some suburban parade. Relatives I hadn't seen in years climbed out, dressed in wool coats and polished shoes. They laughed, they hugged, they carried bottles of wine, completely unaware that they were about to witness the truth. Inside, David stood in the center of the living room, beaming like a man about to accept a crown. Emily hovered at his side, pouring drinks and smiling too wide. When he saw me, he gave a mock-polite nod. "Glad you could make it, Dad. Try not to make things awkward today, okay?" I didn't answer. Not yet. The guests gathered, murmuring about the announcement. Aunts, uncles, cousins, even a couple of Linda's old friends from church. The living room smelled of perfume, spiced wine, and the faint must of old wood. David cleared his throat, raising his glass. "Family," he began, his voice loud, rehearsed. "As you know, Mom left behind a wonderful legacy. Properties, investments, and, of course, this home. It's an honor to continue her work and carry the Whitaker name forward." There were nods, smiles, even a few claps. Emily added sweetly, "David has worked so hard to manage everything responsibly. We want to share that today with all of you. The trust is officially under David's control, and with it, the family estate." A wave of whispers rippled through the room. I caught the look of surprise on one of Linda's cousins. He must have thought it was strange that I hadn't said a word. I let the silence stretch a moment longer before I stood. Not so fast. The room went still. Dozens of eyes turned. To me, David stiffened. "Dad, please, don't do this here." But I did. I laid the stack of papers on the coffee table with a deliberate slap. "Your mother was many things," I said, my voice low but steady. "Smart, careful, and, above all, protective. She saw what greed could do. She knew how money changes people. And she left something behind to make sure no one could throw me out of the home we built together." I held up the deed and the IB trust clause for everyone to see. "This house, and every acre of land it sits on, stays under my authority until the day I die, or choose otherwise. No eviction, no sale, no forced move." Linda made sure of that. Gasps filled the room. A cousin leaned forward to squint at the papers. David's face drained of color. That's not possible. The lawyer, I cut him off. The lawyer didn't tell you everything. Or maybe you didn't bother to listen. Either way, the law is clear. Emily tried to recover, forcing a laugh. Oh, come on, John. Do you really expect everyone to believe you over David's attorney? I turned the papers around, letting the relatives read the highlighted clause for themselves. One by one, their murmurs grew louder. Looks legit. She thought of everything. Smart woman, Linda was. David stepped forward, his hands shaking. Dad, you could have told me. We could have handled this privately. I met his eyes, steady as stone. You tried to throw me out of my own house, David. You humiliated me in front of the town. You treated your mother's memory like a business deal. You don't get private anymore. The room was silent, every face locked on him. Finally, an older uncle spoke up. Sounds like Linda trusted John more than anyone else. And from where I'm standing, she was right. The weight of the words crushed David's posture. His shoulders sagged, his jaw slackened. Emily muttered something under her breath and stormed into the kitchen, her heels clicking like gunshots. But I wasn't finished. I pulled out one last paper, the mortgage history. You see this? Every payment, every month, for 30 years. My name's on every line. Not yours, not your mother's family. Mine. This house was never given. It was earned. I looked around the room, my voice breaking just slightly. And I'll be damned if I let anyone, even my own son, tell me I don't deserve it. The room erupted. Some clapped. Some shook their heads at David. And my boy, my flesh and blood, just stood there, small, pale, cornered. But justice wasn't finished yet, because what I had planned next would make sure the entire town of Cedar Falls knew exactly what he tried to do. The living room was buzzing like a hornet's nest. Relatives leaned into one another, whispering, shaking their heads. Some glared at David. Others avoided his eyes. Altogether, Emily stormed back in from the kitchen, her face red. This is ridiculous. You're all just taking his word for it? He's old, confused. He doesn't know what he's talking about. But I didn't have to say a thing. Thomas Keating, the lawyer I'd visited, had slipped in through the front door. I'd invited him quietly, without telling a soul. He walked straight into the living room, briefcase in hand, and set it down with a heavy thud. Actually, Thomas said, opening the case, he knows exactly what he's talking about. Gasps spread like wildfire. Thomas pulled out certified copies of the trust documents, notarized and sealed. I drafted part of these revisions myself at Linda's request. The survivorship clause is binding. John Whitaker has full rights to this property until the day he dies or chooses to vacate. No one, not his son, not the trust, not even the courts, can force him out. Silence. Then, one by one, heads turned toward David. He stammered, his face blotchy. This isn't fair. Mom wanted me to have control. Thomas cut him off. Control doesn't mean cruelty, son. And from what I've heard, you've already crossed that line. The humiliation hit him like a wrecking ball. His relatives' eyes burned into him, judgment dripping from every stare. A woman from church muttered loud enough for half the room to hear, "Imagine trying to evict your own father." Shameful, Emily hissed, grabbing David's arm. "We're leaving." But the damage was done. As they shoved through the crowd, no one stopped them. No one offered a kind word. No one followed them out. They were alone. For weeks afterward, the fallout spread. Word traveled fast in Cedar Falls. By the time Sunday service rolled around, everyone knew. David stopped showing his face in town. Emily's smile vanished. They moved back to Des Moines quietly, tails tucked, whispers chasing them every step. Me? I stayed right where I belonged, in my home. Linda's blue tool rack still stood in the garage, the smell of oil and steel lingering like a memory. Every time I walked past it, I felt her presence. Strong, steady, proud. One evening, I sat on the porch as the sun dipped low, painting the fields gold. My neighbors waved from the road. For the first time in a long time, I lifted my hand and waved back without shame. I had my dignity, my peace, and the knowledge that Linda's last wish had been honored. David had tried to strip me of everything. Instead, he'd lost the one thing money couldn't buy: respect. And that, I suppose, is poetic justice. Because sometimes the cruelest punishment isn't prison or poverty. It's walking through your hometown and realizing everyone sees you for what you truly are. Tell us your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories.